Good morning. There was a Mrs. Powell in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention approached Benjamin Franklin, and she asked this question: "Sir, what's it going to be? A monarchy or a republic?" And Ben Franklin said, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." You see, it's much easier to have a monarchy because the king makes all the rules. But the problem with a monarchy is that you have no freedom. America was founded on the basis of freedom as an ideal. And our founding fathers saw in our very creation that we were not only blessed as a people, but we were blessed to be a witness to the world. And yet it seems that there are so many within our country that have no clue who we are and what we're about. To that I speak today. Mark Dice, and you can track this on YouTube, did an interview of people on the beach in San Diego recently and asked them the question: what was the War of Independence about? Why did we fight? Who did we fight? Are there any founding fathers? And then he said, now, of course, everybody knows that two of the founding fathers were Jesse Ventura and John Wilkes Booth, so you can't name them. And people were dumbfounded. They had no idea. They couldn't name a single founding father. One guy did offer, I kid you not, name a founding father: Jeremiah. Wow. They didn't know if we had been liberated from Nazi Germany. One thought Abraham Lincoln was the president when the Revolutionary War was fought. Some thought China was who we fought against. Amazing. And so as I think about this and where we are as a country and our lack, appallingly so, of knowledge about these things, some will say, well, what difference does it make? A republic, madam, if you want to keep it. By abdicating our knowledge and our interest, we don't keep it. And so we ought to learn about who we are as a nation. We need to hear that story. And so the proverb speaks to this. Proverbs 14, verse 34, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Righteousness in a sense of following the right course, of living with virtue, of having character. Righteousness is an exaltation. That is, it builds up. And it builds up not only individuals, but it exalts a whole nation, for the nation is comprised of individuals. Righteousness exalts a nation, but here's the contrast. Sin, now whatever you want to call sin, dysfunction, selfishness, all kinds of words come to mind, going the wrong way. But sin is a disgrace. That is, it's something that is not good, something that might be shameful, something that is going to take you in the wrong direction. But sin is a disgrace to any people, not just the people of Solomon's time, not just the Hebrew children, but to any children, any place. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. And so it was Ben Franklin who said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Why do we pass laws? It's because people break laws or break rules, and they live in inappropriate ways. And what do? You create a law. And so this is what happens. The more that you exalt the wrong thing, the more masters you need, the more prisons you need, the more freedom is taken from us because our unrighteousness leads us in places of destruction. And so there was a Frenchman by the name of Alexis de Tocqueville who came to America in 1831 at the request of his government, the French. And he came with the purpose to look at our penitentiaries and to discover what it was about the way that we administered justice through our penal system. And as a result of that, he wrote a book called Democracy in America in 1835. And it is an incredible book. And I want to share some quotes with you from that work. He said, "The American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the public's money." That is, that if we elect someone to represent us and they go to Washington and they realize that if I can get votes, I will go in this direction. It's not about a moral decision. It's not about the decision of what is best for the country. It's that you vote for me and keep me in power, and then I will do whatever. Let me tell you, from my perspective, the best thing that we could do as a nation is pass some kind of term limits so that people only get a certain period of time and they don't end up being career politicians. Because the concern becomes, what's in it for me? How can I serve my own best interest? And so when George Washington had the opportunity to become a monarch, to become a king, he said, no, 2 terms is enough. I'm done. Let someone else come along. He was a great man. He was a great leader. He deserves to be one of our heroes. Here's something else that Alexis de Tocqueville said. "I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and boundless forests, and it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. In her democratic Congress and her matchless Constitution, and it was not there. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good. If America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great." A Frenchman, 1835. So the question is, well, why should I do the right thing? It's because individuals comprise the nation. And so I believe it's true. The people running for office, a lot of us are not pleased with those that are running to be the President of the United States. But let me tell you, those people are there because of us. Those people are representatives of us. That is who we have empowered. And this is what we get. And so de Tocqueville was understanding that there needed to be a separation between church and state, but he did not believe, nor did our founding fathers believe, that we should remove the church from the state. What I was talking about was that the church and state, you don't create a national church because it has a way of being corrupt, because it gets embedded with the government, and the two become one and the same. You need a church. The founding fathers believed that. You just don't need a national church that says this is the United States of America church. You don't do that. So this is what de Tocqueville said. In France, I'd almost always seen the spirit of religion and the spirit of freedom marching in opposite directions. But in America, I found they were immediately united and that they reigned in common over the same country. So he recognized that the greatest authority was not government, but the greatest authority was when we believed and trusted in God. George Washington, our first president, in his farewell address in 1796 said, "Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion." Our founding fathers all believed that, and surprisingly so, the influence and importance of having faith. They did not want that wiped out of the public sector. They believed that was the core of who we were, and that if we do not live in that way, then there is going to be a terrible end and conclusion of our nation. And so I believe that we all need heroes and heroines. And this is one of the struggles I think that we have in our culture today, is that it seems like we're trying to tear down people rather than build them up. And so children need heroes. Now, I don't know about you, but I think for most little boys that the first hero is usually a sports figure. And that was true with me when I was in Michigan in the second grade, and I picked this obscure second baseman for the Detroit Tigers to be my hero. He was an African American. He had like a .252 career average. He was second baseman. There was Al Kaline and Norm Cash and Rocky Colavito, all of these great players. Oh no, I picked Jake Wood to be my hero. And as a short, scrawny little kid, little white kid from Oklahoma living in Michigan, watching this Detroit Tiger play baseball, I asked my dad. I was just as serious as I could be because I loved Jake Wood's neck. I thought he had the coolest neck. And I would stretch my neck as a little kid. It's like, oh man. And I would ask my dad. And you can imagine, what would you say when your son comes up to you, a little scrawny white kid, and says, hey, Daddy, do you think I'm looking more like Jake Wood? I don't remember my dad's answer, but I wanted to be like my hero. We need that. And then when you start growing up, let me tell you, just because you're not 6 years old doesn't mean you don't need heroes. You still need heroes. And we need heroes. And we need to know those stories, and we need to hear about their character. And the characters that are our heroes, not going to be Bernie Madoff, who made off with a lot of money. It's not going to be Timothy McVeigh, who blew up a building in Oklahoma City. It's not going to be Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus, nor will it be King Herod the Great. We need heroes and heroines of character, people who can inspire us and help us to be better than we are on our own. This is what we need in our culture. Let me introduce you to a possible hero. In the book that Eric Metaxas has written, it's a book, If You Can Keep It, is the title of it. He tells a story about George Whitefield. It's spelled W-H-I-T-E, but pronounced Whitfield, not Whitefield. George Whitefield was a contemporary of John and Charles Wesley. Went to Oxford, was part of the original Holy Club that morphed into becoming what was known as the Methodist. And George Whitefield had a real conversion experience, gave his life to Christ, deeply, deeply impacted, deeply, deeply changed. He was a godly, godly man. And he started preaching the gospel, and he was powerful. They said he was such a good speaker that George Whitefield could say the word Mesopotamia, and it would make people weep. And so he became a rock star in England at a young age. And when word spread to America that George Whitefield was coming to our shores, when he arrived, there was nothing like it. George Whitefield became the first American celebrity. And so when he preached, everybody came to see him. In fact, it was not until 1964 that a group of 4 other Englishmen, one also by the name of George, came to America. He was the most popular Englishman that came to America, most likely until the Beatles. And so Whitefield began to preach, and people began to come and hear him, and they were touched, deeply touched by his message and by his passion. They said that when he preached, he usually cried. He wept. He was so convinced of his message. And so one day, as he was preaching, there was a fellow by the name of Benjamin Franklin that was very curious. He's an inventor, a scientist, and he wants to go out and he wants to hear this Whitefield character. He hears that there are crowds upwards to 20 to 30,000 people that were listening to Whitefield preach. And Franklin wanted to know if that was really an accurate estimate. So he went to hear him preach. And indeed, he estimated between 20 and 30,000 people were there. But it was the words of Whitefield that struck Ben Franklin's heart. Franklin said that that he had some copper coins in his pocket. He had 3 or 4 silver coins, and he had 5 gold coins. And he figured that Whitefield would probably take an offering, and he was resolved at the beginning not to give him anything. Ben Franklin was notoriously thrifty. And yet, when the message began, the message touched Ben Franklin's heart. And he resolved, I'm going to give, if they take an offering, my copper coins. And as the message proceeded, he decided he was going to give his silver coins. And when they actually took the offering that day, he gave his copper, his silver, and his gold coins. Franklin said it was amazing because the guy next to him had heard Whitefield speak before, and he emptied his pockets before he came to hear the sermon because he knew the effect that it would have upon him. So this guy turns to the guy next to him and he said, excuse me, sir, but do you have some coins I could borrow? Franklin said the guy that he asked was probably the only man in the whole crowd that wasn't moved, and he told the man, normally I would loan you the money, but it seems that thou art not in thy right mind. Now you think about what Whitefield did and what he preached. He really believed his message. And his message was that grace was available to all people. And he focused upon children, upon women, and upon African Americans. And he became the great equalizer of American society. That all people were valuable, all people were of worth. And in this book by Eric Metaxas, he says that it was George Whitefield, more than any other person, that developed before the Revolutionary War the moral character of our nation. More than any other person, it was George Whitefield that had this impact. And so you think about the impact of a person upon the culture, and you think about the difference that that person can make, and you recognize that that has influence. And so 1787 rolls around. Americans assumed that because we won the Revolutionary War, everything was over, the English left. That was not the case. Let me tell you, it was fraught with problems. And the problem was that those 13 colonies that were now 13 states came to Philadelphia to assemble, and everybody, all 55 representatives that were there, all came with their own agenda. They did not want to talk about the United States of America. They only wanted to talk about their own individual state. And so they fought, and there was discord, and they could not reach agreement. And so they're trying to revise the Constitution. They're trying to revise the Confederation of the States and create this Constitution, and they couldn't agree. Ben Franklin, who had heard George Whitefield, got up. And you know, Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin were the most unorthodox in the Christian faith of any of the founders. But it was Benjamin Franklin who got up before the Congress that was at such odds with itself. It was Benjamin Franklin that said these words. He's 81 years old. I've lived a long time. The longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. If a sparrow can fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We've been assured in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I beg that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business, and that one or more of the clergy of the city be requested to officiate in that service. And so the impasse was ended. And these 13 states that could not agree upon anything came to an agreement. And they wrote what is called the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, which says in its preamble, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If there had been no George Whitefield, would Ben Franklin have seen it in that light? If they had not agreed, we would never have become the United States of America. We would have fallen into selfishness and everybody doing their own thing. America is a remarkable nation. It's incredible how God worked in the lives of our founding fathers. And if we want to keep our republic, we'd better know the gift that we have received. We better pay attention, better learn the lessons of freedom if we want to extend them to others. And so I think about this text of where we are, of righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. I think about that, and I'm well aware that the righteousness is not my own. I do not create my righteousness. Righteousness, like my freedom, is a gift of God. And from that righteousness of Jesus Christ, I have the opportunity to be made right in His sight. And so we seek first His righteousness, and then all of these other things are added to us. We give ourselves to Him, and because of that, we are free. And if the Son has made us free, we are free indeed. The freedom is not for our own end. The freedom is not for a pretext for evil. The freedom that God has given to us as American citizens, as Christian people, is so that we might bless the world. And that's our call. And that's our responsibility and our privilege. So as we come and as we celebrate this day of Holy Communion, thinking in the back of our mind what's going to be happening tomorrow as we shoot our firecrackers and are grateful, I hope that we know the deeper truths and that we'll talk about them and that we'll teach our children and our grandchildren and that we will be grateful to the one who has made our freedom possible. As you travel around the world, you will notice the distinct nature of this country. And my prayer is that we will be truly a righteous and godly nation, given to the right things, to the cause of God. And as John Wesley said, if your heart is as my heart, lend me your hand. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I love the way that it says in our hymnal on page 12, the word invitation, because this is an invitation to you. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be self-righteous, but this is an invitation to come and to receive the sacrament of communion. Regardless of church background, regardless of where you have been, this is that invitation. John is here and will instruct you on how that can be done.
Yeah, so our hosts are going to dismiss us in just a minute after Tom leads us in the liturgy. The liturgy is just one of the ways that we tell and remind one another the story of the gospel. So we're going to share in the liturgy, and then you don't have to be a member of this church. Just hope that you'll come, that you'll be dismissed as the host leads you, and then come with open hands. And if you've not shared communion with us before, someone's going to break off a piece of bread